And so we went on, we had the third bone marrow transplant, which was his own cells. And they said, nobody has ever not engrafted with their own cells. You don't need to worry. Brilliant, we thought. On August the 29th, we had a call to say that his third transplant had failed because they couldn't understand this. This is something, again, another anomaly they'd never seen before. What had happened was, as his own bone marrow had gone in, it had activated something left behind by the donor. Now, they thought there was nothing there. There was. And now Deryn's T cells were all his own, but all the other cells were the donors. And so it was very strange. And they said, they actually took me to one side and said, what do you think is going to happen here? You know, looking at the numbers. And I said, well, I think that the two bone marrows are going to collide, because you can't live with two sets of bone marrow, two sets of DNA. He was a half and half. I said, you know, I think they're going to fight to the death, and it's going to fail. And that's exactly what happened. So thankfully, somebody had the good grace, because just before transplant, what they do, and they don't do this now, which is a severe worry to me, but what they did back then was they took what they call a rescue dose. So they took an awful lot of his bone marrow before they put him through conditioning to completely eradicate his bone marrow, to put the new bone marrow in. They took a big bag of his own cells just in case, which if they hadn't have done that, he wouldn't be here.
No.
And somebody had the good sense to split that bag in two. So he actually had one more chance. That was all we had left now.
Wow.
And they said to us, you know, we're going to give him more chemo to make sure there's absolutely no chance of any of the donor cells in there whatsoever. So we're going to have a completely clean slate, and we're going to give him his own cells back. And nobody's never, you know, this is going to be fine. This is going to work. There's no chance this isn't going to work, but this is his final chance. Like, and this, if it doesn't work, there really is nothing more we can do. You know, you can't live without a functioning bone marrow. So it would have been treatment that would have killed him, not cancer. And which is the usual case, sadly. And so in October of the same year, 2013, he had his final cells put in. And 3 days later, he trapped his fingers down the side of the bed and picked up 2 catastrophic infections in his hands. And he had 1 catastrophic infection in his mouth as well at this point, called Klebsiella. And he picked up herpes whitlow and cellulitis in his hands and these 3 fingers. And it just drew on everything that he had. His bone marrow just could not, it just couldn't engraft. It just couldn't set in, because the infections were just taking everything. Every bit of bone marrow that he tried to, you know, kind of get was just going out of the window straight away with these infections. They were just eradicating him. And so they said to us, nobody's ever engrafted after 50 days. If it hasn't worked at day 50, it's never going to happen. And we got to day 46 and there was nothing. There was nothing in there. And they said, you know, look, we've come to the end of the road. Now there is nothing more that we can do. And these infections in his hand, I mean, it was like, there's pictures, not in the book, but they're online. And his fingers, it was like frostbite. They were black from the knuckle down. It was horrendous. The infection, there was no blood flow going there at all. So his fingers were necrotic and he was feeling them die. And this is where I really started to look at cannabis, because lots of people had said to me before now, you know, you need to look at cannabis. And the very small amount of kind of research that I did on cannabis was for people with cancer. Now, he didn't have cancer anymore, so I kind of dismissed it. And it was only now at this point where he was already on fentanyl. He was on the most amount of morphine he could have. He was on every other painkiller going. He was on gabapentin. He was on everything to try and prevent this nerve pain. And nothing was working. Nothing was working at all.